before anything else, if you've ever been through something that shook you to your core, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear raw, uncomfortable truths. And tell me in the comments, would you have the courage to do what I did? I know the title already sounds insane, but sometimes insanity is the only path left when routine slowly kills you and love becomes a memory. Yes, I invited a girl to celebrate with my husband, and it wasn't out of insecurity, loneliness, or revenge. It was something deeper, more human, more disturbing. This is one of those stories no one believes until they live something similar. A story of infidelity, betrayal, emotional cheating, but also of intimate revelations, forbidden confessions, and a reconnection that you'd never expect. Everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and trust crumbled that night. You'll see why sometimes the greatest act of infidelity isn't touching another body, but the silent abandonment of the one you promised to love. Get ready, because what I'm about to share with you in full detail is more than a scandal. It's a journey into the soul of a woman who dared to cross the line. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see your own reflection in my story. I'll never forget the moment I stood in the hallway, watching everything silently unravel before my eyes. It wasn't just a scene. It was a choreographed secret, a planned surprise that blurred the line between love and betrayal. My husband sat across from her, the woman I had invited. Not a stranger, but a professional. Her presence was deliberate, and yet the intensity between them felt alarmingly natural. That's when I realized this wasn't just a birthday gift. This was an emotional gateway. There was no script, yet every glance, every soft nod between them echoed a silent agreement. I had planned every step, from the wine to the timing, believing I could control the chaos that might come. But nothing prepared me for the magnetic energy sparking between them. It wasn't just physical. It was a breach of trust unfolding like poetry in slow motion. Even if I had given the green light, I hadn't anticipated how real it would feel. I thought I understood what emotional cheating looked like. I thought betrayal had to scream to be real. But no, sometimes it just stares you in the face while wearing the outfit you picked out. There was something terrifying in the silence, in the fact that no one needed to say anything. That quiet unearthed hidden truths in me, things I didn't even know I had buried. Regret, curiosity, and a subtle, haunting guilt. It's strange how a birthday plan meant to spice things up can lead to a full-blown act of infidelity, even when everyone involved had technically consented. But what I didn't expect was how my own emotions would betray me. I wasn't just watching a scene. I was standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting to decide if I should jump. And something in my gut told me this was just the beginning of something much bigger. I stood frozen, like a statue carved by contradiction. One part of me was screaming to leave, the other aching to get closer. Watching them wasn't just voyeuristic, it was transformative. I could feel my pulse syncing with theirs, my breath catching every time their hands brushed. It wasn't jealousy I felt, it was yearning. Not for him, not for her, but for a version of me I had never dared to meet before that night. There's something dangerously seductive about crossing a line you helped draw. I had told myself I'd be just a spectator, but the room was dripping with a tension so thick, it pulled me in like a riptide. I wasn't just watching an infidelity story unfold. I was silently authoring it with every second I stayed. It no longer felt like a gift to him. It felt like an invitation to a part of myself I had abandoned in the name of routine. I had spent years being the responsible one, the loyal wife who held our house together with invisible strings. But in that room, surrounded by dim lights and whispered breaths, I wasn't a cheated ex-wife or a separated woman. I was a woman, cracked open, raw, and desperately curious. I wasn't betraying my husband. I was betraying the version of me that kept swallowing her own desires just to keep the peace. And so, I stepped forward, slowly, intentionally, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The moment my hand brushed against his shoulder, I felt a shift, like the story of infidelity and betrayal had flipped its narrator. I was no longer on the outside looking in. I had become the storm. But what I didn't know was how deep this storm would drag us all before the calm ever came. There's a kind of language that doesn't need words, just glances, pauses, and the weight of a shared breath. That's how we spoke in that room. No one said, "This is okay." No one asked for permission. But through the softness in her eyes and the vulnerability in his posture, I saw a mutual, unspoken yes. It was a dangerous dance of forbidden confessions, orchestrated in silence, and I was now part of the rhythm. She looked at me, not with dominance, not with hesitation, but with something that felt like reverence. A professional, yes, but also a woman who understood the gravity of emotional cheating. Her touch wasn't invasive. It was a question. And my body, though trembling, answered with a quiet lean forward. Infidelity isn't always betrayal wrapped in lies. Sometimes, it's an act that everyone involved silently agrees to, while their hearts scream conflicting truths. I glanced at my husband, and in that instant, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Fear mixed with desire. He was seeking direction, needing to know this wasn't a trap. And without a single word, I nodded. That one movement carried years of history, unresolved needs, and buried secrets revealed under one dim light. It was both terrifying and freeing to realize how little we actually needed words to say everything. People often ask me how someone allows such a thing. But they don't understand how long I'd been craving to be understood without explanation. To be seen without performing. That room, in its fragile stillness, gave me something monogamy had stopped offering, a mirror. Not just to reflect who I was, but who I could become. And as strange as it sounds, it made me realize the real betrayal might not be what I thought it was. The air was thick, not with lust, but with something far deeper. Vulnerability. I had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways, but none of them came close to the way it actually felt. She moved with grace, like someone who had been here before, yet still treated the space as sacred. My husband reached for my hand as she guided us, and in that instant, it wasn't cheating. It was a surrender to something neither of us could name. Intimacy has layers, and that night, we peeled through each one. Not recklessly, not hurriedly. Every gesture between us was a thread connecting a bigger, messier tapestry of marital disloyalty and rediscovery. I wasn't thinking about consequences or labels. I was just present. Her eyes met mine often, not in challenge, but in inclusion. It felt like she was holding space for us both to unravel together. My husband, usually so guarded, became someone I hadn't seen in years. His vulnerability surprised me. Not just the physical kind, but the emotional shedding that came with every touch. For the first time in forever, he wasn't performing. He was exploring. And I wasn't the unfaithful wife. I wasn't the cheating spouse. I was a woman relearning her body, her power, and her worth, with someone who finally made her feel safe to do so. What we shared in that room defied the definitions people cling to. It was an infidelity story, yes, but it wasn't about betrayal. It was about rediscovery. It was about connection that didn't need to fit inside anyone else's rules. And even though the world would call it wrong, even though it might sound like a shocking revelation, in that room, it was the most honest I had felt in years. Touch has a way of speaking when words fall short. That night, every caress felt like an apology, a question, and a promise all at once. We weren't rushing. No one was trying to impress. We were just three souls tangled in an experience that felt more like healing than desire. It wasn't wild or reckless. It was deliberate. Every movement carried weight, like we all knew we were rewriting the narrative of infidelity and betrayal in real time. I had never known physical closeness could offer emotional support so profound. There were no masks, no pretending, just hands reaching in search of comfort, of reassurance. She wasn't just there for him, she was there for us. Her rhythm didn't separate us, it aligned us. And in that moment, I realized something that hit like a quiet thunder. Betrayal doesn't always come from others. It often starts when we abandon our own needs for too long. As we moved together, our bodies told a story more honest than years of conversations ever could. I could feel his regret. I could feel my own grief for the years we had let this distance grow between us. But in that closeness, we found clarity. We weren't avoiding the pain anymore. We were facing it with hands, breath, and skin. It wasn't about cheating. It was about breaking a dam that had held back too much for too long. And as strange as it sounds, there was no shame, no fear, just this deep, sacred sense of unity. It wasn't just about pleasure, it was about restoration. About feeling alive again in a body I had numbed for years. Some people call this an act of infidelity, but for me, it was the beginning of something raw and real. And I could feel something shifting, something that would never go back to what it once was. The moment it reached its peak, everything else dissolved: time, fear, doubt. There was no right or wrong anymore. Just three hearts colliding in an emotional climax that felt less like desire and more like release. I cried. Not because I was hurt, but because I was finally free from the pressure of pretending everything had been okay for so long. That release wasn't just physical. It was the marital breakup of every false identity I had clung to. Afterwards, we didn't speak much. We didn't need to. There was a sacredness in the stillness, in the way he held my hand and pressed his forehead gently against mine. She sat close, her presence comforting, not intrusive. The room no longer smelled of risk. It felt like truth. And even though this might read like just another infidelity story Reddit users would debate about, to me, it was a confession of a forbidden love, a love for parts of myself I thought had died. He kissed me, softly, not passionately, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of that kiss. It wasn't lust. It was an apology. It was gratitude. It was 1,000 words he'd never be brave enough to say. And while some might see us as a cheating spouse and a woman who cheated on her husband, what I felt was connection. Not perfect, not clean, but undeniably real. I can't say we left that room the same people who walked in. Something had been stripped away, some veil, some illusion. What remained was raw, imperfect, and honest. And though the world might label it as betrayal in marriage, for me, it was the start of something too complex to fit into anyone's moral framework. But then again, some forbidden testimonies aren't meant to be explained. They're just meant to be felt. Now tell me, what would you have done in my place? I know this story, might challenge everything you believe about love, loyalty, and betrayal. But sometimes the real infidelity isn't in the body, it's in the silence. It's in the nights you go to bed next to someone who's already left you emotionally. So, here's my question for you. What truths have you been hiding from yourself? What needs have you been silencing just to keep the illusion alive? If you've ever felt like you were living someone else's story, this is your wake-up call. Not to do what I did, but to finally feel again. To have the courage to question, to speak up, to reconnect, or even to walk away. Because emotional freedom starts when we stop pretending we're okay. And trust me, nothing changes until you do. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever crossed a line you thought you'd never cross? Or been the one watching someone else do it? I want to hear your truth. Raw, unfiltered, real. And hey, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because we're just getting started. There's a lot more to uncover in the messy, beautiful world of love, loss, and redemption.